Hello, everyone. My name is Carolyn Podruchny, and welcome to my workshop on creating workable and engaging online lectures. So, I'm a professor in the history department here at York University, and today I'm going to be discussing, in general, my experiences in creating online lectures. And I've divided up my talk into a few sections. So first, I'm going to be discussing my background, the background context of creating my online lectures. Secondly, I'm going to be describing different styles that you can use of online lectures. Third, I'll talk about some of the specifics of hardware and software in creating online lectures. And then last, I'm going to talk at length about my style of creating online lectures. So section 1, background. So I've always been pretty interested in exploring avenues of online teaching because I'm disabled, and it can be tough for me sometimes to teach in person. So when I created a new course called Ancient North America, a first-year course that is in the history department, I decided to make the plunge to try online teaching. And I first started off in my first year as a blended online course. So I created lectures and recorded them, put them up on Moodle, and then met with the tutorial in person. So I had the benefit of going through it in real time, getting feedback from students. But since that time, I've actually taught the course 3 or 4 more times fully online, and the course has grown every year. And this past year, it was 150 students with 6 tutorials and 3 teaching assistants. So I'm actually now currently creating my second fully online course that's also going to be a 6-credit course. It's at the second year level, and it's called Global Indigenous Histories, and it's going to be launching this coming September. So I didn't have any prior experience at all with teaching online, but I was really motivated to learn. So at the time when I was starting to think about this, in 2014, 6 years ago, very few people at York were teaching online. So I did take a mandatory course about online teaching at the Center for Teaching and Learning. But I did also spend a lot of time browsing through online courses that I could find on university websites. I also looked at iTunes University, and I also spent a lot of time browsing on lynda.com. And I believe that York University Libraries now subscribes to lynda.com, so it's easy for you to browse and see what people do. So I didn't find an ideal model of what I was looking for. So I decided to just basically create my own version. And I created something that I would most like to see. If I was a student, what would I like to see in an online course? So I decided to create my video lectures in advance instead of doing it in person. And I also divided them up into fairly small segments between 10 or 30 minutes, even though this particular lecture that you're watching is longer. And the reason why I decided to go with fairly small segments is because I found that they were easier to manage in terms of the technology and dealing with file sizes. So once I created these lecture segments, usually 3 or 4 or 5 lecture segments per week's lecture, I would then upload these to YouTube. So I created my own channel in YouTube, and then I uploaded them in an unlisted format. So this means that they don't appear in public. No one can find them unless they actually have the link to the lecture. So what I would do is then post the links to the week's lectures onto Moodle. And what I would do is, instead of posting everything for the entire course all at once, I would go in real time and post them week by week. So I would usually make them available the Friday night before each week started. And then I would leave them up for the rest of the class so students could go back and look at them if they wanted. So each week, students participate also in threaded discussions within their tutorials on Moodle. And these discussions are based upon the lectures and also upon the readings. So in Moodle, I would also post discussion questions and have students answer questions and comment on other students' answers to different questions in order to create a threaded environment, a threaded discussion. So let me show you what this all looks like in Moodle. So you can see from my Moodle course that the weeks are all named by a theme. And each week I would post a page. So that page would have the links to all the video lectures. And you can see everything is clearly labeled on the page. And then under that week, I would also post a handout containing a summary of the main point of the lecture, a list of terminology that the students should keep in mind when they're listening to the lecture, and also a list of 5 or 6 discussion questions. And students would then use these sheets as study aids for the exams in the course. So underneath each week, I would also post readings if I'm giving them articles or links to articles, or if I want them to watch a film or read a website, I would post all that there. And then I would post a discussion forum for each tutorial that lists the discussion questions for that week. And like I do with the lectures, I make everything visible week by week as we progress throughout the course. All right, so let's now turn our attention to section 2 of this presentation, styles of lecture. So there's many different ways in which you can create a lecture, and I want to show you what some of these look like. So the first way is that you can record yourself in a classroom giving a lecture. And this was by far the most common example I found on iUniversity. So most people seem to do this or seem to prefer this model. A second model is that you can record your voice giving the lecture and have it play over your PowerPoint presentation. So I found that this was a really common model on lynda.com. So when people are giving workshops or presentations, they are really focused on their PowerPoint or their visual presentations. Okay, a third model, and this is actually the model that I use, is that you can record yourself in an audio-video format, giving the lecture directly to the camera, just like I'm doing now, pretending that the camera is your audience, and also keeping your face on the screen for the majority of the lecture. And a fourth way that you can create a lecture is that you can record yourself as if you were being interviewed by someone off camera. So this is most common in TV interviews. You'll find that if you've created online presentations, working with York, that they'll often have someone, just off camera and you're talking directly to that person. I think because it helps create the sense that you're actually talking to someone, and it gives you a more fluid and common style. So like I said, I opted to lecture directly to the camera and to keep my talking head present on screen for most of the lecture, usually in a small box in the corner, as you've seen in this presentation, while I show images, maps, and clusters of text on the rest of the screen, or even when I'm showing other segments of films on the screen. So I think one of the biggest challenges to online teaching is the impersonal nature. So I figured that keeping my face on the screen would help students feel like they're being taught by an actual human. Okay, so let's turn to section 3 of this presentation, equipment for the lecture. So there's many different options that exist for recording your lectures, and I don't know what all of these options are, but I'm going to tell you mostly what I do. So I know that York provides support for Camtasia and also filming through Zoom. So I've not tried either one of those. Because I'm an Apple or Mac computer user, I did research back in 2014, and I found what I thought was the easiest and most robust and least expensive option for Apple computers. And that is the program ScreenFlow. So, and I still use it today. So it's roughly between $130 or $210, depending on which version you buy. I just bought the cheapest version. So I do think that most of the video editing softwares are quite similar to one another. There is one that stands out that's got a really different format, and I recommend you avoid this. And that is the software iMovie that comes within your suite of Apple products. And it's just incredibly different from other video editing softwares. So anyway, that's why I avoid it. But it is easy to move among the video editing softwares. So if you do use Camtasia and you want to try out ScreenFlow, it's not that hard to move between the two. Professional video editors use Final Cut Pro, but I found that this was just much too expensive and far too robust for what my needs were for creating online lectures. So if you do plan to embrace online teaching, I do think it's really worth investing in a good microphone. So mostly microphones come embedded within computers. They certainly come embedded within Apple computers. But after the first few lectures I created, I noticed that my voice sounded really tinny and I didn't get a good sound. So I use what's called a Blue Yeti microphone. So I bought one 6 years ago and I'm still using it today. I think you can see it right here. And I just have it sort of on a stand braced up right in front of my computer, kind of out of reach. So certainly try to record when it's quiet in your house, but don't worry too much about external noises. So the dog is going to bark, the doorbell's going to ring, everybody knows that you're at home, so just don't worry about those things. But try not to record, when everybody is showering in the morning or if everybody in your house is like having a big party or something. So pay a little bit of attention to the lighting in your office. Just play around with the lighting. Think about your background, for example. So I'm not the tidiest of person, but my office does look like it's a working office, which it is. I had a really hard time trying to get rid of the glare in my glasses, and I decided that I just wouldn't worry about it that much. So the biggest technology need that you should definitely plan for, and this is getting an external hard drive to store your video lectures. So I learned this very quickly. When I made my very first lecture online, the file was huge. These video files are huge. And I really quickly filled up my hard drive on my desktop computer. It also started messing up with my RAM. So I did increase my RAM and I got an external hard drive and I started recording my lectures directly to the external hard drive and also making sure that all the backups and the cached files went to the external hard drive. So I think that's the most important part of the technology you need for creating online lectures. All right, so let's turn to the fourth and final section of this presentation, creating my lectures, my personal experience. So in general, for my courses in the history department, I would think about the equivalent of having in person roughly 3 hours of lecturing per week. But you really only need to plan for half that amount of time for online lectures. So the reason why you need less time to convey the body of material that you want to convey is that you're not using up time checking in with students when you're recording these lectures. Generally, you're not making jokes, you're not answering questions, you're not repeating yourself as much as you would at an in-person lecture. So students, remember, have this recording. They can go back to it several times. They can pause it. They can play it more slowly. They can play it faster. So you don't need to repeat yourself to the same extent as you would when you're in person and students are taking notes at that time. So I also use the same lectures year after year. I think they probably have about a 5-year shelf life. So I well, I learned this the hard way. I try not to make time-rooted or time-sensitive comments that are going to quickly date or that won't make sense in the future. So I could be making a lot of references right now to what's going on with the COVID-19 pandemic as it unfolds in Canada. But I'm going to refrain from doing that in this lecture and lectures I make for my students, just so that the lectures do not date. So this is I'm moving on to a hard one. Try to be relaxed and happy when you're recording. So it is weird, you're sitting at home alone in your office and you're talking to a little green light on your computer. So try to imagine that as your audience. So students are going to really pick up on your mood and your body language. So I certainly started off being fairly stiff, and looking uncomfortable and not enjoying the experience. And then I slowly eased into being relaxed and enjoying it and imagining that I'm talking to, a room full of people in my office. So I do tend to write out my lectures in full. So I did write out this presentation, and I do tend to read my script when I'm recording. So to ensure that I don't look like I'm reading, I try to place the script as close as possible to the camera on my computer, so I don't look like I'm reading off the computer like this and I'm not looking at the camera at all. So instead, I'm always looking slightly under the camera. So, and I also tend to write my lectures in a really conversational tone, and I do allow myself to go off script when I need to, like I did just now. So when you're recording your lecture, do not at all aim for perfection. So you're going to make mistakes. If you do make a mistake, just correct yourself as if you would do if you're in a normal in-person lecture. So you notice that I stumbled over the word perfection, so I didn't stress about it. If you do make a really big mistake, you certainly can actually just start over. And then you can cut out the airing the wrong footage at the editing stage. So try not to do this too much because you're just creating a world of trouble for yourself. On some occasions when I really don't want to re-record things, and I do spot an error in the lecture, I might actually then, when I'm in the editing stage, put something up on the screen, some text that corrects the error. And so usually I go with a big oops message and just say, in text, I meant to say this. I meant to say this date instead of that date. So in the past, what I've done is I've created my lectures first and I've recorded them. And then I've gone looking for images to put on the screen afterwards. So this was not a bad model, but I certainly found the pressure to always have something going on the screen while I'm speaking. So sometimes when I'm telling a story that just cannot be conveyed, with images, I'll put my head back up into the center of the screen and my talking head will be the main event on the screen. But in other cases, I'll leave my head in the bottom of the screen in a small talking head box, and I'll be putting up words and phrases to emphasize the points I'm trying to make in the screen. So certainly, if I am going to be talking about a specific person or a person from the past, I'll put up that person's name, and sometimes if I can find a picture of them, so people know who I'm talking about. Same thing with any kind of particular vocabulary or jargon or terminology. I'll put up those words on the screen. But I definitely use images as much as possible or maps. So when I'm listing things in a lecture, I ensure that this list appears on the screen while I'm speaking. So, for example, I'm going to list, all the things I'm enjoying about the pandemic. So I'm enjoying staying at home. I'm enjoying that everybody's being really nice to each other. I'm enjoying that this has forced me to learn yoga because I can't go to the gym. And I'm enjoying spending more time with my spouse, which I never got to do before the pandemic when we were both working out of the home. So you can see I listed all those things on the screen. So once you get comfortable with your video editing software, you can use different effects. You can zoom in on certain things on images or maps. You can use callouts on your images where you highlight certain things or text on the images. You can point to things. But really, I would recommend that you don't rush into all these effects. In the beginning, definitely aim really low and just try to get your lecture up on the screen. That's the most important thing that people need to see. So it's also incredibly easy to add video footage into your lectures for clips. So the clips can be short, like 10 seconds, or they can be as long as 30 minutes. So I've noticed that my teaching has changed in the sense that I tend to spend a lot of time on YouTube looking for interesting bits of film to put in my lectures. And I've actually added footage of historical sites that I've filmed during in-person visits. But one of the things I want to emphasize when you're doing all this video editing is, and I'm going to yell, do not fall into the giant chasm of video editing looking for perfection. So it's really easy to do this. I was shocked by how much time I spent editing my videos. Video editing is extremely time consuming and you can definitely get carried away. So you have to remember that we are not documentarians at all. All we're doing is trying to get our lectures on screen for the students to watch. So that's why don't get carried away with any of the video effects. I do use a few simple methods just to make the lecture a little bit easier to use. I tend to use a fade in and a fade out for all images and text that appear on the screen, which softens the look. And I've also been thinking about starting and ending with music, and in order to use that as a cue for students so they know when it starts and they know when it ends. So I'm going to play with this, I think, for the new course that I'm developing. You have to remember that you must use music that's in the public domain. Another thing that I'm thinking of doing for the new lectures I'm creating right now is I'm trying to integrate images while I'm actually writing the text. So in a sense, I'm creating a PowerPoint that will go with my lecture, and I'm trying to spend more time talking to the images that will appear on the screen so that it will run more smoothly and make more sense to the students. But one thing that I want to warn you about is that you're going to be posting your lectures on Moodle for your classes. So you have to think carefully about the copyright of the images and the footage and the music that you might use. So as much as possible, make sure that things are in the public domain. But when I post my lectures on a page in Moodle, you can see here that I include a section called attributions, and I list all of the attributions for images, footage, and music that I've used in the lecture so that I'm acknowledging the place where I got all the information and items that occur in my lecture. Okay, so let's turn to the conclusion now, the bottom line. Online teaching certainly does not capture the magic of in-class teaching or in-class presentations, but it can get close. So I think the benefits are that it allows people who will not be able to attend class in person due to distance or disability or time conflicts or global pandemics. It allows them to take the course at all, and it also allows them to take the course in their own time and have it work around their own schedule. So the biggest challenge is certainly that you're teaching into the void, and you never really know if your students are understanding the material until you start grading their assignments and exams. You can minimize the void that your students feel by showing as much as yourself as possible in the online lectures and humanizing the lecture as much as possible for your audience. So I do think that the biggest challenge for the instructors, though, is not having a sense of your student body and your audience as you're speaking, especially, and also the learning curve for using the technology. So give yourself time to learn the technology. So, but I do think that online teaching does provide opportunities for different kinds of learning experiences and incorporating interesting kinds of material into a digital environment. And it's really worth playing around with that. But I do think for sure the largest benefit is the accessibility for learning for those who cannot attend in person. And really, right now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we're all disabled and we all cannot attend in person. So don't hesitate to reach out if you've got questions. I've posted my email address right here, and I'd be happy to talk over Zoom or talk over email, whatever you'd like. Thank you so much.